All right, I just wanted to go over absolute and relative cell references one more time. I noticed that I think um, some people are really getting this, but I noticed there's quite a few people who are kind of struggling with the concept, and it's an important one, so I wanted to go over it. So here I have my finished payroll project that we did a little while ago, and there's a lot of absolute cell references in this. And what I'm going to do is start out in column I right here. So I'm just going to delete these formulas. So I'm going to select I6 all the way down to I18, and let's just go ahead and delete this. By the way, open this file up in Excel and follow along with me for this exercise. Okay, so pause it if you haven't done that yet. And then once you get started again, we'll go ahead and delete the formulas in column I. Okay, so first of all, notice that when we did that, all the other formulas that are relying on the cells in column I that I just deleted have automatically been updated. So that is the power of Excel. You don't want to have to update all the cells just because you change one cell. Um, okay, so what we want to do here, I'm going to make I6 the active cell. And what we want to do here is we want to take the gross pay and multiply it by the federal tax rate. And that will give us the taxes that each employee has to pay. So I'm going to start out, I got I6 as the active cell. I'm going to hit the equal sign, and then I'm going to click on gross pay here. And then we need to multiply that. Now, some people did this. Some people looked at the federal tax rate, which is 25%, and they typed in 25%, or the other way some people did it was 0.25. Either way is fine in Excel. So that would be H6 times 25. Now that will work and your data will be correct, but it's not really correct, and I'll show you why. So I'm going to go ahead and hit enter here, and then I'm going to use the fill handle to copy that formula down. And now again, the data is correct, but here's the problem. What if I came over here and I adjusted the federal tax rate up to 50%? So if I do that, then I would want all my rows that are using that cell J2 to be updated automatically. But they're not doing that because I hard coded 25% here. So even though I changed the federal tax rate up to 50%, if I go ahead and look at my formula in column I, you can see that it stays at 25%. That's not what we want. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and let's change the federal tax rate back to 25%. And then I'm going to go ahead and delete these formulas here one more time. Go ahead and I'm going to show you another thing that I suspect people were doing here before we get this right. So I'm going to start over, put my active cell, make it I6, hit the equal sign, and then click on H6. And then I'm going to um, enter the asterisk for multiply. And now this time I'll click on cell J2, and you can see instead of putting 25% in there, it puts in J2. So that means that whatever J2 is, that's going to be what's used in this formula here. So now I'm just going to hit enter. Now this is not correct either, and I'll show you why. So remember when we use the fill handle to copy and paste formulas, the default behavior is to kind of remember the pattern. So what I mean here is if I use the fill handle to copy this down, we have quite a few problems here. Now, if I analyze what's going on here, I'm going to double click on a cell and I'll see that um, we're using H6 in this formula and J2, and that happens to be correct. But look at what happens here. If I go to the next cell down, which is I7, if I double click on that, we'll see that it's using the cell that's to the left, which is what we want. But instead of using 25%, it moved down to the state tax rate. What's going on there? I'm going to click on the next cell down and double click that. Now look at that. It's using the cell to the left and this cell. which doesn't have anything in it. I'm going to go down one more cell here. I'll double click on that, and now it's trying to multiply H9 by this cell that says state tax in it. So remember that by default, when you copy and paste a formula, Excel uses the pattern. So let's go back up to the top cell here in that column. So if I double click on that, we'll see that it's copying the cell that's one to the left of the cell, and it's also copying the cell that's one to the right, and then 1, 2, 3, 4 cells up. So it's copying the pattern. So if I go down, let's just go down to the bottom one here. I'll double click on that. So look at that, what that's trying to do here. It's copying the cell that's to the left of the cell and the cell that's to the right by one cell and 1, 2, 3, 4 cells up. So it's copying the pattern. So it's the pattern, meaning the pattern relative to the cell that we're in. So one cell over, this happens to be correct. We want it to use a relative cell reference for the gross pay. But when it comes to the tax rate to apply, we don't want it to remember a pattern. So instead of saying, okay, choose the cell that's one to the right, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 cells up, or was it 4 or 5? I can't tell. We want this cell to stay fixed on the tax rate. And in order to do that, we need to use an absolute cell reference. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to select all these cells here and delete the formulas again. Now some of you, I noticed, did this. You went through and you didn't use an absolute cell reference, but then after you used the fill handle, you went in and manually replaced. So you changed J3 here to J2, and then you went to the next cell down and changed J4 to J2. That's still not correct, because you can tell if it's an absolute cell reference or a relative cell reference, and we'll talk about that in just a second here. So anyways, some people were going through and modifying the formula so that it was using J2 instead of using one cell to the right and 4 cells up. So let's go ahead and delete this one more time. So I'm going to delete all these cells here, I6 through I18. And we're going to start over, and this time we'll do it right. So do the equal sign, and then we want to multiply the tax rate by our gross pay. So I'll click on H6 for the gross pay, and then I'll enter the asterisk for multiplying, and then I'll go ahead and click on cell J2. And now to make our formulas stay fixed on J2 when we fill them down the column here, we need to turn J2 into an absolute cell reference. And the way to do that is to put a $ before the J and before the 2. Now some people only had one $ in there, but you got to remember that you need the $ before both the column and the row to make it an absolute cell reference. So anyways, I had the $ there, and what that means is, I'll go ahead and hit enter here. What that means is, as we fill this formula down the column, H6, the first cell reference, that's relative. So that's going to just choose every cell that's just to the right of wherever we're pasting this, and that's what we want. But J2 is going to stay fixed, so it's not going to follow that pattern of 1 to the right and 4 up. It's going to stay fixed on J2 whenever we fill it. So I'm going to go ahead and use the fill handle here, and you'll see that now, no matter which one of these cells I double click on to analyze what's being used in the formula, J2 is always going to be there. And that's because we use the $ to make the formula stay fixed on J2 when we fill it. Okay. Okay, now one more shortcut to show you. I'm going to delete this one more time. Delete those cells. I'll go ahead and enter the formula one more time here. So equals, and then click on H6, and then my asterisk for multiply, and then I'll click on J2 here. Now I could manually enter the $ before the J and before the 2, but there is a shortcut. if you press the F4 button, then it will squirt the dollar signs in there for you. So the F4 will take a relative cell reference and turn it into an absolute one by adding the dollar signs before the column and the row. All right, I think that shall do it.